Since the Centre couldn't run at Hampton Downs for Superlap round 4, I rushed to get the new skidder ready. It's a naturally aspirated New Zealand new S14 200SX with a totally stock SR20DE. Sound familiar? It does have a solid 6-point cage, adjustable suspension, tube frame front end, a welded diff, and quite a lot of fiberglass cable tied and tech screwed onto it. I arrived bright and early and realised when I went to do documentation that I'd left my competition licence and club membership card tucked into the logbook of the Centre. While waiting for Amanda to arrive with my documentation, I took in the first stint from the sidelines. In the fast group, Ben van der Werf's Evo, Greg Hurst's MR2, Brendan Purdy's Commodore, Glenn Hodges' Micra, and again joined at the hip Chris Sharp and Adrian Rivers in the S3 and Civic. The slow group was led out by Brian Matchett's GTS, followed by Mark Greeny's 3 Series, Carl Flynn's 3 Series, Luke Hunter's Starlet, and Rachel Flynn's 3 Series. Here's Cal in his first run at Hampton Downs in some time. Glenn took this stint out with a blistering out-of-the-box 112, while Brian adamantly reasserted his claim to a fast group spot. And Cal came out hard to pit Mark by a second and change. While I was in the dummy grid learning how to belt myself in with a Hans device, the fast group circulated in the new grid order. This was my first time driving this car at pace, the first rear-wheel drive I've driven at Hampton Downs, and the first car with a lock diff that I've driven on a track since 2005. My race pads had been delayed, thanks New Zealand couriers, so Todd had furnished me with a couple sets of Remsers, which were soon feeling the heat. I was being pretty conservative, but the car handled well, so I started pushing harder by increments, feeling out its limits. Rachel had chosen to start behind me, and I can only assume that was to get a front row seat for this kind of thing. You can see the car step out over the crest, overcorrect, and from there it's all over. Here's Cal showing how it should be done. Glenn extended his lead. Mark fought back to finish within a couple of tenths of Cal, and despite a fairly ugly run, I ended up with a 24.0, a second and a half quicker than my PB in the Sentra. I was also a second and a half up the road from Rachel, who was now playing whack-a-mole with intermittently misfiring coils. Meanwhile, I jacked my car up to sweep about 5 kilos of sand out of its crevices. Third stint, and the weather was still playing ball. Brendan needed to finish fastest if he was to have any sniff of the overall top spot. He hadn't driven Hampton Downs for something like 6 years before this. He ended up retiring with a mechanical failure, but we in the slow group were unaware of all that. Dave Brew got out for his first stint of the day in the Turbo Civic. Rachel picked up the pace, but the BMW was still not running right. You can see my bonnet flapping in the breeze. Apparently it looked very comical from outside at high speed. The car still has its stock exhaust system, and it wouldn't really pull at over 6500 RPM, but there was plenty of time left in it regardless. Here's what would be Kel's fastest lap of the day, a 1:19.4. We return to the pits to find Brendan with a seized engine in his VK.
I've never undone them before. Never had the cover off, so.
Oh, we'll still go there.
Oh, looks nice and clean, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Greg was finding pace, but had yet to best Brendan's stint 2 1:14.5. I knocked half a second off my stint 2 time, but Rachel improved by a full second, reeling me in. In the V8 3 Series, Mark was gunning for Kel's time, needing at this point just half a second. A snapped axle put paid to that. Greg finally eclipsed Brendan's time, but no one looked like challenging Glenn's 1 minute 10. I improved by just a tenth and had a terrible sense of deja vu as Rachel closed to within half a second. What will happen on day 2? The same thing that always happens? You'll have to watch and see.